Okay, principles of secure design. Usually when I give this talk, people in the room say, there are principles and we have to follow them. In this case, you all know at least as much as I do about this and quite a bit more. So in 1975, Seltzer and Schroeder came up with these principles of secure design. In 1977, a little known movie came out, Star Wars, which will actually tell you everything you need to know about secure design. Starting at the top, simple should also be known as economy of mechanism, means less points of failure. Empire didn't do so well following that one when it created the second Death Star and that complicated screen on the moon of Endor. Too many places things can go wrong, and they did. However, next principle, fail-safe. When they created Princess Leia's dungeon, and she had people come rescue her, they did an excellent job of causing them to fail over and over. Because when they showed up, they could get into the cell block and they couldn't get out. And they tried to go down the garbage chute and they couldn't get out. And when they were there, the monster came out at them and they couldn't get out. In fact, if they had followed the next principle, they would have been fine, which was the complete mediation. If something goes wrong, you have complete mediation, and C-3PO shows up and explains it all to you, and you're never left wondering what to do. Least privilege. Case where you give people the least amount that they need to know. Remove choices that you don't want them to make. My favorite example is Obi-Wan, not telling Luke about, what's his name, his father, because you don't want him to choose the dark side. Least shared. You have commands that are used differently, and if you have shared controls, that's a problem. One of our favorite ways to object to this is don't share your passwords across site, because if they get one, they get them all. So the example of that is the clones that all work the same, and then our heroes who work differently. Separate privileges, no all-powerful IDs, we talked about that earlier. If they had done that, R2-D2 would not have been able to save our heroes from the dungeon. Open design. Do not make it depend on secrecy for it to be safe. In other words, everybody should know how it works, but not what it is. Great example is passwords. Everybody knows how it works, but they don't know your password. Empire totally screwed up on that by creating these Death Star plans, which were then stolen, and once they knew how they worked, they were able to compromise them. Least surprise. Make it work the way people expect it to work. Pretty simple. That's the way I always want it. And come up to a door. I want to know whether you push or pull so I don't look stupid, or follow a known model. Great example, or they say, is in, pilots hop into one of those spaceships and they immediately know how to fly it. I don't know if I believe that. And then there's the lightsaber. The lightsaber works the way you expect. You swing it, it cuts, it goes whoosh. So you get to the end of that, and you've got 8 principles. But what I noticed was, 5 of those principles are user-focused, so I can apply a usability principle and not teach 8 secure principles and then 7 more usability principles. I can teach these 8 principles, and I have 5 of them that relate right back to the user. So if we really were following all of the principles for secure design, we would have usability. And the problem is we're not following true secure design principles. Now, after I gave this talk, people kept asking me for the information on it, and what they could get is my slides, and they say, I don't know what you said. So now there's an app for that. Actually, there's a web app for that. So you can play the Star Wars game and take a tour of the Star Wars universe and review your principles. Hey, I got 1 more minute.
It's orange, red. Sorry.
Gonna take my last minute here. Right back to, this is who I am, in case you didn't know that. And here is, oops, it's not showing what I have on my screen.
Oh, hold on. This is my fault. Gotta hit escape first.
I'm still gonna come in under 5.
She's got it. Oh no, I don't know how to do this.
There we go, close enough.
Boom.
So I have a landing page there where you can participate and play the Star Wars game, and it's bit.ly/SW Secure Design. I will put that link on my overhead, which he will publish, and you can click on that, learn more, send me an email, and when it's there, thank you.
Woo! Well done. I'm so sorry. You did such a great job. All right. Okay, I'm not going to show the 1-minute sign. I'm only going to show the 15-second sign. There's too much color blindness in the audience for today. Okay. It's just hard. Okay. I'm blaming the user. That's right. All right. So next up, which color is yours? This one. You ready? Okay.
Press play.
Oh yeah, I got to do that. That's right.
So hi, so I'm Alana Banana, I'm Canadian, I'm here in the USA. You know I'm Canadian because if you were to push me, I would turn around and say I'm sorry. I started the research a little bit backwards. I'm the chair of cybersecurity and behavior at Western Sydney University. I work with a really interdisciplinary team in cybersecurity, but I also do special advisory work for a cybercrime investigation company. And this research is phase one of a project that was born out of the work that I do in hunting down cyber criminals, particularly in the payment diversion, fraud, and cryptocurrency space, and in recovering assets for billionaires that get duped constantly. So what we're finding amongst those companies, we started the research a little bit differently. We didn't want to design a survey or head into certain kind of components until we better understood exactly what was happening. So we reached out to companies that had been victims of payment diversion fraud, or as you call it here in the US, I think quite often, business email fraud. So these were companies that were losing anywhere between $13,000 in a single payment all the way up to $12 million in a single payment that was diverted overseas. There was even one attempt at $100 million in a single diversion payment. We went and we interviewed these companies, and that is forming the basis for the survey and the empirical work that'll come afterwards. So if I could summarize the research and what we found in the 10 interviews, it would be cognitive dissonance. So here are the things that we found that we're not seeing in other literature in the area, because most of the other literature in the area is focused heavily on phishing, how to prevent the phishing attacks from getting in to begin with, or the spear phishing. We started with presumption that a certain amount are always going to get through any system, and what are the processes once the spear phish has gone through and the payment diversion cycle is hit. And here are the summary of the results in about, I don't know, what's remaining, 3 minutes, 2 minutes? 3 minutes, okay, I've got time. Companies, this one behavioral-wise really struck a chord with me. In all of the interviews that we did, each and every company thinks because they were hit and sent the payment overseas, that they won't be hit again. So for me, that was really alarming and kind of funny, right? Because as a threat researcher, we know how often threat changes, and they're just going to modify and adapt their strategies to get you a second time. The second interesting component is that unlike other frauds, because we do a lot of work in binary options, pyramid, and cryptocurrencies, they have really distinctive money patterns if you follow the money back. Payment diversion in the 10 interviews that we did does not. So typically you'll find with money laundering, it'll go through Singapore or Hong Kong, almost always. In the 10 instances where we did, none of it went through Hong Kong or Singapore. It was going to Mexico, it was going to Sweden, and that actually took me for surprise. So to me, that tells me there's a much more diverse group of people behind the payment diversion fraud. Third, we were given access to all the detailed reports from these diversions, and that's been really interesting. So my team has a background in digital forensics, pen testing, behavioral scientists, law, network security. We've got the whole gambit. So we're kind of going into this from a holistic perspective to see what we can tease out for the next components of the survey. The only thing I can say is even once a company was hit, not only did they not believe they were going to be hit again, there would be detailed reports on what they could do to prevent this thing in the future, and usually they would only uptake 1 or 2 out of the 20 recommendations. And here's the best part. Of the companies that done phishing training, didn't help one bit. Not one bit. And so for me, it's really curious to see all this research and how you can do a training. But in the interviews, it was proven, even the one company, they'd just given their training like less than 2 weeks, and they were hit by the payment diversion right after the training, right? This is sophisticated. And these people are in systems. It's not, some of the phishing we looked at, all of the copying, you know, they had clearly been in this adversary's system for a long time. The reconnaissance that was done was not something minor that was done in a fashion overnight. You know, it was a spear phishing, and then once they were in the system, really doing a lot of reconnaissance. The other thing is none of the amounts that they asked for with the companies were arbitrary. Not once, not ever. really specific amounts that mimicked precise similar types of payments that they would have made to that company. And in one instance, this was a payment that was going to be made because the company was merging with another company, and the diversion of tax was that one.
Well done, thank you. What is this? Oh, for your progenitor. You just loaded spyware on my computer, I'm sure. No, I'm joking. All right, hold on. Is it this one? You are this one, right?
Yep. Right. Testing. Testing. Hi everyone. Today I'll be presenting my ongoing work on how I'm planning to design more inclusive alerts for privacy and security. In our daily lives, we are exposed to various kinds of alerts when we use our computers and our mobile phones. But have you ever thought how a person who might be of an Asian background, or who might be an elderly person or a child, how would they behave when they're exposed to these kinds of alerts? I'll be skipping most of them. And with the increased globalization and increased mobile phone adoption around the world, we have increased diversity of users, whether it's elderly person or blind person or deaf person using this, exposed to these alerts. So I'll be mainly using the HITL framework developed by Professor Laurie Kraner to look at how I can make it more inclusive. Okay, skip this. So if I look at Singapore specifically, in the past 3 years, there's been a significant increase in children below 7 years old. Okay, children below 7 years old and elderly above 60 years old adopting a smartphone. But as we all know, these users don't have much security and privacy knowledge. And I'm planning to use inclusive design methods where it's potentially shown to benefit the entire population when you design for these underrepresented or marginalized groups. And what you can see in this picture here is a curb cut, where originally it was designed for those who are wheelchair bound, but it ended up benefiting the entire society. So this is one of the benefits of inclusive design. So you can see how external, in the HITL framework, you can easily see how external factors and the human factors affects how a user would behave when they're exposed to alert. And these are the steps a designer would take when they are applying the human in the loop framework, the HITL framework. First, he identifies what is the task the user will be performing. This could be either browsing a website or installing an application. And the designer can choose to automate some of the steps based on the user. And you can identify the potential failures the user might experience as a result of his background or cultural differences or age, capabilities, etc. And finally, you mitigate the potential failures he could be exposed to. So I'll be using the lead user approach, which is developed by von Hippel. And this will be actually using, looking at the extreme users who are usually not considered when a designer designs a system. And these lead users usually exhibit needs which are higher demanding as compared to the general population. And sometimes when you design for the lead users, you could benefit the general population as well. So in order to adopt the lead user method, first you identify lead users based on extreme conditions. These extreme conditions could be, you can look at the ages of the ages itself. You can look at a very young person or old person who has some individual who has very good technical capabilities or very little capabilities. And then you design for them and you validate whether the general population also benefits when you design for this population group. And if there are usability issues when you faced by the general population, you have to make some minor tweaks. So when you combine both these methods, you want to consider the lead users in these 3 steps when you apply the human in the loop framework. So let's say I have a fictional user, lead user, so he's a Singaporean elderly person. He just upgraded from a Nokia feature phone to a smartphone, but he doesn't have any knowledge about how to browse the websites or how to set up his own Google account. Maybe the shopkeeper set it up for him and he wrote down the password. So he doesn't even know how to manage it, but he's still using this smartphone. So when we empathize with this user, we will definitely consider what are the failures he might experience. And this could potentially benefit the general population as well. So the 3 points on the left side are actually extracted from the human in the loop framework. I didn't consider all of them, but it's just 3 of them. So you can immediately identify that, let's say, when you're designing a system for a smart nation or for the entire world, you will definitely have users from diverse backgrounds. So how do you design a system which is resilient for the entire population? Is it done? Okay. Yeah. So I hope to provide more Asian perspective since I didn't find much papers from Asia. So that's all. And I hope to reduce the weirdness of this research. Most of the research seems to be from the US and westernized. Yeah, that's all.
Thank you. Here, take this. All right, we got one more.
Thank you. Do I have a clicker or I'm hitting the space bar? Okay, terrific. Hello? Yeah, let's do it. Great, so my title is a bit of a mouthful, so we're going to jump right in. I'll give you a sense of why you should give me your attention for the next couple of minutes. So to sum up, this is going to be an I did something so you don't have to kind of a talk. Ideally, I'll give you something portable and a tool to help you make your own comparisons, dig a little bit deeper. I looked at a new multi-factor authentication scheme, and I'm going to help you locate it in a crowded field. So if you do work in usable security and authentication, you're stuck always having to make the argument about the persistence of passwords. They're gonna stick around, right? Probably you go a little bit deeper. Maybe you look at new schemes to potentially replace passwords or augment legacy textual passwords if you're thorough. Right now, looking at what's new means considering the recent offering from Google, who in April of 2019 released a multi-factor authentication scheme that would permit the users of Android handsets to use their phone as a multi-factor authentication key that would ideally operate similar to any FIDO-compliant security key that you're used to. In short, the scheme is new, it's hot, and it's not being widely discussed in academic spaces. Among other things, the developers of Android security keys claim that they provide a similar set of security benefits to USB-based implementations. So to put their claims to the test, I did an early usability, deployability, security analysis using the framework of Bonneau et al. So you can look at this briefly, but please don't try to read it. You'll hurt your eyes. It's just my beautiful LaTeX I'm proud of. The important thing to do when comparing authentication schemes is to determine if and how a new scheme might improve upon the incumbent technology. So in my case, I was looking at Android security keys and principally USB-based security keys. And comparing these schemes, I did identify an important trade-off when it comes to usability. There's no special purpose hardware and nothing new to carry when you're using your handset as a key. Unfortunately, you're also stuck interacting with your phone's UI, your lock screen, and you are, instead of just touching a capacitive sensor for your proof of presence. Beyond that, when you consider a basic set of UDS benefits, pretty similar. There are differences in deployability that we can forgive since this is a scheme recently out of beta built around open standards. And the security does appear to be on par when we look at UDS, but if you take a little bit of a closer look at the security model and associated threats, I think there are potentially some benefits that we see. So security-focused research has identified a problem when it comes to plugging in your security token. You're essentially mounting an I/O device. Android security keys seem to remove this attack vector by keeping the authenticator and the client separate and using an extension to the CTAP protocol to provide for some secure Bluetooth communication. Additionally, because they're using this new and not well-documented extension to CTAP, the cloud-assisted BLE of Google, we're actually potentially improving things further. We're no longer pairing, and so you don't get system-wide access, and you don't get your problems with proximity, ideally. Where does that leave us at? To my mind, there are a few avenues for further investigation. First, we need to formally verify the benefits associated with cable. Additionally, we want to look at the extent to which the authentication protocol implemented is limiting the ability to link users if we get colluding third parties. This is something that we could additionally do with any FIDO compliant key, where I think arguably there's only K unlinkability when you look at the attestation scheme. At present, the majority of Android handsets also lack a secure hardware element like a Titan M chip, which means you're dealing with a soft key for your proof of presence. And that, again, gives us another attack surface. So the cost benefit of doing that could probably be modeled. The developers of Android security keys have suggested that if you want to avoid lockout, if you want to get around some of the issues that you might have with accessibility or interoperability, the best thing to do is to have a backup USB security key, which to me seems to defeat the purpose a little bit. So I think it might also be an interesting thing to do when we're able to see additional relying parties use this scheme, which I think will be coming in the near future, to do some usability studies and see if in the wild, if these things actually result in a usability issue. So that's about all I have time for, quick and painless. If you want to pitch questions to me today, I'd be happy to talk afterward. You can email me if you want to talk about potential collaborations or you want to unpack some of these things further, or look at my paper from the Way workshop yesterday, which expands on some of these ideas.
Okay, you guys did an excellent job. I did a terrible job, so well done to all of our speakers. Let's thank them one more time, our Lightning Talk speakers. Great job, everyone.